Welcome back to another episode of Start Here, the mini-series within SugarMamma's Fireplay, where I answer your real-life questions with practical, empowering steps. Today's question comes from a young family of 4 with baby number 3 on the way. Now, this family desperately want to buy a home, but living in Sydney makes saving for a deposit feel impossible. And they're starting to wonder, should they move to a regional area where housing is cheaper, living costs are so much lower, and her husband could actually earn a stronger base salary? And she actually asks, am I silly for considering this? Because I just can't see how we will ever save a deposit whilst living in Sydney. Now, this is such a powerful and timely question, and I know so many families are asking themselves the exact same thing. So we're going to break this down together so that you can see where to get started with your next financial chapter. All right. First of all, I want to take a moment to say you are not silly for wondering if you should do this. You're actually courageous. It takes bravery to ask these tough questions and search for solutions rather than give up on the whole dream of owning a family home. You know, housing affordability in major cities right now is at crisis point. The property prices have soared. The loans required to take out these loans are absolutely enormous and leave you living on a shoestring budget. And then you've got rising rents, which make it almost impossible to actually get ahead, let alone start saving for a deposit. And then you add to this the lack of new supply and growing demand of properties. And it's no wonder families are feeling like they're struggling to actually stay afloat, let alone start saving for a deposit. So your message is actually perfectly timed. And I recently spoke on the Today Show about the idea of a financial gap year that is really trending right now with young millennials. And sometimes you need to just take a step sideways, or even in some cases, take a step back, which is not what I'm saying you could do right now. But sometimes we just need to sort of change the landscape, the environment, in order to be able to move forward efficiently and with greater joy and simplicity. And for some families, this actually could be the key that unlocks home ownership within a reasonable amount of time. Now, what exactly is a financial gap year? Okay, it's not about jetting off to Europe, but a financial gap year is essentially what you're contemplating right now. It's about moving away from like the pressure cooker of city life to a regional area where the cost of living is a lot lower. Rent, housing, fuel, groceries, transport, even like going out socially is often so much more affordable. Now, this creates breathing room in your budget, but also for your lifestyle. You know, for some families, this time is used to aggressively save for a deposit and then move back to their home. Whilst for others, it's about using this time to, pay down debt or to get started with investing or up the ante on their investment strategy, particularly for passionate members of the lifestyle movement, FIRE. Or it's simply about just taking a much needed reset away from the stress of city living. Now, I've actually seen a lot of my friends do this. Some moved to regional areas for the savings, and others just wanted a break from their crazy Sydney mortgages. That is, they moved out of their homes, put them on the rental market, and got someone else to help pay their mortgage off whilst they enjoyed a slower pace of life. And many actually ended up falling in love with the regional life, the slower pace, the stronger sense of community, and the ability to afford those small luxuries like massages, weekends away, going out to beautiful restaurants, without any guilt or damaging their financial future. Now, some actually ended up staying permanently, buying homes and taking out mortgages that felt way more manageable rather than crushing. And others actually returned back to the city after a few years with either a deposit in hand or a lot of their mortgage paid off. So the overall picture was everyone had a lot less financial stress from having some time out in regional areas. Now, my point is, if you decide to do this, it doesn't have to be forever necessarily. And even a few years doing this financial gap year could really help change the trajectory of your financial life, whether it be saving up a deposit, getting out of debt, or kickstarting your FIRE investment strategy. So, what are the key benefits of moving to a regional town? So, when you start thinking about moving regionally, the first thing people usually focus on is the lower housing costs. And yes, that's a huge part of it. Smaller deposit is needed, which means you can get into the property market so much faster. And the mortgage repayments are usually much lower than compared to living in the city. But it doesn't actually stop there. It goes wider and deeper. It's not just about the property prices. It's actually the entire cost of living. Rent, childcare, groceries, commuting, eating out. Almost everything tends to be cheaper. And that means more money in your pocket that can go directly into your savings, towards your deposit, your investment strategy, or even for some people into superannuation if they're planning on retiring soon. And in some industries, regional salaries can actually end up being so much higher. I've previously mentioned I was talking to a makeup artist whose nephew is an electrician working in the mines. He's 20, earning $250,000. Like, you're not going to find an electrician's job for a 20-year-old in a major city paying $250,000. You can see what I'm talking about potentially higher salaries in regional areas. And employers know what they need to actually attract talent, and also reliable, consistent, good quality workers. So they're prepared to offer a competitive base salary and sometimes with some additional perks like transport, cars, rental allowance, food, of course, bonuses, sometimes even employee share plans. So that could mean your family isn't just saving on costs. You also might be able to increase your household income. And then there is the lifestyle side. Regional living often comes with a more slower pace, and more space, bigger gardens, bigger homes. You can actually do so many more things, with amongst nature. There's a much stronger sense of community. It's easier to connect with people. They're not rushing and racing to catch the bus or the train. People just walking down the streets at a slower pace and more open-minded and relaxed. And you start to feel like you belong somewhere. Instead of, as I said, rushing and sitting in traffic, you might find yourself, enjoying an afternoon walk in the park or going to backyard barbecues or weekends that don't cost a fortune like they do in major cities right now. And I've personally seen families who thought home ownership was completely out of reach and they'd almost pretty much given up. But they gave themselves 2 or 3 years to live in a regional town. And they came back with savings, stability, and that all-important deposit that they had dreamt of. So it gave them a great fresh start, and they wouldn't have been able to have created that if they had stayed in the city. Now, there are obviously challenges that we need to consider with this because as attractive as this sounds, it's really important to be honest about the challenges as well. There are two sides to every opportunity. One of the biggest hurdles is obviously the emotional side, leaving behind friends, family, and your support networks. And for young families, especially with a new baby on the way, that support is critical, particularly for mums. So you're going to need to weigh up about, how much you need to rely on those networks and how you'd feel without having them nearby. Or if they're not nearby, what can you actually do about it? And then there's the question of career. Is this a move that is aligned with your husband's long-term career growth? And of course, importantly, what about you? Are there opportunities for you to work if you want to? Sometimes regional areas can offer fantastic opportunities, but only in particular fields, which can be really limiting and frustrating. You also need to think about schools and healthcare. Is there a local hospital? Is there a good, daycare options? What about the education system in that area? These aren't necessarily deal breakers, but they're really important factors to look before you commit and pack those bags. And finally, lifestyle. Some people thrive on that lower pace and others really struggle. They get bored and they get bored quickly. If you're someone who genuinely or even secretly, thrives on the buzz and the energy of a big city, a regional town may feel a little bit isolating. And this is why I often suggest looking at it as like an experiment rather than a permanent move. Give yourself a timeline of, say, 1, 2, 3 years. And if you love it, amazing, you can look at staying. And if it doesn't work out, you can reassess and make a new plan. But the key is to go in with your eyes wide open. So how do you actually make this big decision? Well, this is what I suggest doing. Sitting down as a family and asking some very honest questions amongst yourselves. First of all, what is your ultimate goal here? Is it to buy in Sydney, no matter how long it takes? Or perhaps it's actually just to own a home anywhere, whether it's in a regional area or in a city? Because your answer here will actually help influence everything else. Secondly, how much of a deposit do you realistically need? Is it $50,000, $80,000, $100,000? And have you factored in stamp duty and all those other costs? Look at the figure that you actually need to be able to secure the house of your dreams and write that figure down. Put an actual figure on paper because it is much easier to plan around something concrete than a vague goal or dream floating around in our heads. Thirdly, how much faster could we actually save, or you actually save, if you did move to a regional area? You need to run the numbers. You need to do like a side-by-side comparison of your budget in Sydney versus what it would look like living in a regional town. How much can you actually realistically save if you were to do this? And then fourth, are we truly prepared to adjust your lifestyle for long-term financial gains? Are we okay with less access to certain things like big shopping centres, lots of restaurants and cafes to choose from, the beach, the parks, whatever it may be, for more financial security? Is it worth it? Are we okay with that? Can we do this for a period of time? Some people may answer this and go, actually, no, I'm too connected to my area. And there's your answer. But others might go, you know what? In order to achieve this goal, I could do it. I could definitely do it for a couple of years. These conversations are so important. And then fifth, could we treat this as a temporary financial gap year? Could we commit to a set period of, say, 3 years and then reassess? Now, when you do this exercise and you include the practical side too, you research the schools, the daycare options, you look into the hospitals to make sure they have a maternity ward, transport, even the community itself. Does it feel like a place that you could call home, even just for a little period of time? And be really clear about your work. Is your husband's training and experience actually transferable? What is the job security like? And if you wanted to work, what are the opportunities for you? Is it in your skill field, in your experience? Are there part-time options available? What is there for you as well, not just the family? And finally, what's plan B? If it doesn't work, it goes pear-shaped, how are you going to transition back? Having an exit plan, whether you need to use it or not, gives you brilliant and highly valuable peace of mind. So my final advice and my encouragement to this young family right now is to circle back to your original question. No, you're not silly for considering this. You're being incredibly strategic and proactive. Big dreams like home ownership often require really big, confronting, and sometimes scary decisions. And that can sometimes mean making temporary sacrifices in order to create the long-term outcome that you want. Whether you stay in Sydney or you decide to do this and move regionally, the most important thing is clarity. Have a budget. Have a savings plan in place and be really detailed with your goals, the timeframes, and your personal boundaries. And remember this isn't about surviving where you are. It's about creating a life that you want and you dream for yourself and your family. Giving yourself permission to think differently is one of the most powerful things that you can actually do. So don't think about this as running away from Sydney. Think of this as running towards financial freedom, towards stability, and towards the home and lifestyle that you dream of. So thank you so much for this beautiful listener for sending me this question. I know it's one that so many families are really grappling with right now, so good on you for actually picking up the phone and messaging this to me. Now, if this episode resonated with you, can you please make sure that you go and share it with someone else who might be also considering moving, whether it be regionally or maybe even overseas. Sometimes just hearing another perspective can help people feel less alone and so much more excited and empowered to make the right decision for their family. whichever way they decide to go. And remember, if you want me to cover one of your questions, and there are no silly questions, in a future episode of Start Here, which goes live every Friday morning, make sure you send me a DM on Instagram at SugarMamma TV or my fun personal lifestyle account, Canna Campbell Official. And I would be honored to help you take that first step towards creating financial clarity, confidence, and ultimately freedom. All right, until next time, keep that financial fire burning bright within. This is Start Here for Sugar Mama's Fireplay.